Hi, I'm Chris Bing with Cyberscape TV, and today I'm with Vikram, the CEO of NSS Labs. We're coming off a very interesting week here at RSA, where one of the largest storylines was a lawsuit that trailed into this week from CrowdStrike, a restraining order on NSS Labs. And how are we not going to start with that? Vic, what was, in your mind, sort of the reaction that you got on the floor and from people that you spoke with? I know obviously you're constrained to talk about the legal side of it because of litigation, but what was the aftermath?
Well, first of all, the federal court judge, CrowdStrike had gone for a emergency temporary restraining order to prevent us from publishing this week at RSA, and the judge actually denied the request, right? So it's important that, so we did publish. It's been by and large very supportive. I think that there's some sort of confusion about what exactly happened. And as you mentioned, there's some things that I think I just need to be careful of because they haven't yet dropped the full lawsuit yet, and so until that happens, I'm happy to talk about factual stuff, but I don't want to speculate.
Right. So these were test results for products, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
And so, in terms of the efficiencies of products and looking at whether a security product makes sense for a company, tell me a little bit about what NSS Labs does.
Well, so we do what we call black box testing, right? So what we do is we'll identify, by talking with our enterprise clients, which products are on the radar, what's interesting to them, if somebody's a market leader, et cetera. We create a list, and then maybe some interesting technologies that someone's saying, hey, please include me because I think our guys look at it and say, yeah, this is something that is worthwhile and folks should know about. And so we'll include them in our test. We notify folks. Most of the time, folks bring the products in. We've got a methodology that we publish ahead of time, and occasionally we have to purchase some products, and that's, it happens sometimes. It's not, usually it's low drama. It's just folks don't always want their products in. And by the way, sometimes when we purchase the products, the vendors do well. Right. It's not necessarily that there's necessarily a correlation between when we purchase a product and how it fares in the test. So then it's again, no money is paid to us to be in this test. No money is paid to us. You can't pay us to be in it. Can't pay us money to be out of it. And we conduct the test. We publish the results.
Why is it important to test cybersecurity products?
Well, there's a lack of transparency, and it's a market for lemons, or it's asymmetry of information, meaning you can tell, let's say a network product, you can tell when the product's going to slow you down. You can tell when it has a false positive, that it did something it shouldn't, but you can't tell when it misses. So if you're an enterprise, it's very difficult to test these things. And so what we go to great lengths to do is to provide that kind of visibility so folks understand. If I look back a number of years, I don't want to name names, but there was a product that was getting in the high 20s, low 30s. There was a market leader in terms of percentages, in terms of what they were actually blocking. And their engineers came and they did very poorly in their test. The engineers came and said, thank you, because now we have the opportunity to go get the dollars to make the improvements. But before that, it was very hard for them to justify internally. So oftentimes it's well-meaning people because I don't think you get into cybersecurity if you don't believe in the mission in general. That's been my experience with the folks in the industry. But sometimes they need the tools on the vendor side, and on the enterprise side, being able to understand what works and what would fit into your environment is really important, and that's the role we try and play.
In a broad sense, what do you think NSS Labs' impact has been on the industry writ large over the last 10 years?
Well, given the number of breaches, I don't want to. It's hard to say, hey, we made it better, but I do think we've helped. If I look at the block rates, for example, with intrusion prevention, when we first started a number of years ago, the high watermark was in the 80s, and the average was in the 60s. And now I think your high watermarks are in the high 90s, and the averages are in the mid 90s. There's still room for improvement, but that's something that's happened over time because of transparency, right? If you create the environment where the truth comes out and the folks who are doing the right thing engineering-wise, protecting their customers are rewarded, then it creates a dynamic where folks can make those investments and start competing instead of just on the marketing slogans, on what actually works.
Right. So this space is really interesting. Generally speaking, the security testing and defense testing space has gotten a little bit more crowded in recent years. Even 5 years ago, we didn't have these bug bounty companies like Synac and BugCrowd and HackerOne. How have the introduction of these companies affected the market?
Well, for what we're doing?
Yes.
Well, nothing at all. I think, if anything, we actually have partnered with a couple of them in terms of getting samples that we use in our tests and so on. But I think it's fantastic. I mean, the world does not have a shortage of vulnerabilities, and anything we can do to identify them quickly and respond is good. If you think about the losses, that even if we paid $1 million for a bug, a legitimate vuln that could be exploited, and there was, to say, 1,000 of them in a year, right? Okay, that's $1 billion, and it reduced the amount. If you think that we're losing hundreds of billions of dollars a year because of attacks, if you reduce that by, a fraction of a percent, it makes sense. So I think the folks doing it, I applaud them. The companies that are participating in it, I think it's fantastic, and I'd like to see more of it.
And then lastly, NSS Labs is a pretty significant presence right outside of Washington, D.C. How does that location help in terms of recruitment?
Well, so I want to be clear. So we have our main office is in Austin. Yep. We have talent that we brought in from D.C. to Austin, and we do have a presence where we try and stay on top of things, right? There's a lot of smart people in that area. The Northern Virginia, Maryland corridor has probably the single biggest concentration of this kind of cybersecurity talent, and there's being able to work with smart people. I think it's always a good thing.
Vikram, thanks so much for talking with us.
Great, thank you.